Very good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. Thank you so much, Chairman President Yul and Chairman Ha, for inviting me to the East Asia Institute this afternoon. I'm very happy to just kick off this discussion on one of the key challenges that was mentioned by both of you, which is, I think, intertwined with all the different challenges and threats that we have in front of us when we are saying goodbye to a very complicated 2023 and looking for the 2024 year, which will certainly bring us also a lot of difficulties. I'm very happy also to see, and I was commenting to President Yul, to see so many women in a panel. It's the first time I come to a panel, and I do a lot of them, I tell you, where there is gender imbalance for the first time here. So I'm very happy to see that. I have been asked to frame a little bit your discussion, and it's quite timely because we are all waiting to see what will come on from Dubai, from COP28, and we are looking at it and see if there is at least, we're still hoping for a day or two of discussions and what can comes from it. But certainly we have witnessed there how fair distribution of efforts between countries to combat climate change is very complex. And the whole green transition that all the countries, I would not say many, all the countries have to go through is shaking up the global balance of power, making losers and winners, and therefore exacerbating a lot of cross-border geopolitical tensions. Temperature is rising and more extreme climate effects. We all see them in our daily lives in whatever country you go or you come from. Increase the risk of conflicts over water. Water is going to be a key scarce resource where we still see a lot of conflict. Farming, food security, we see that with the impact of the Russian war in Ukraine. And migration flows, which have always been there, but they will certainly be exacerbated by all what we are seeing. COVID pandemic, you've mentioned it, President Yul has exacerbated all the challenges, but certainly has made more difficult to implement key cooperation agreements like it was the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement. Those were the good times because those were the times where we could manage an agreement. Now it's even more difficult in the world that we are. We are therefore now running even behind schedule in all these commitments. Global emissions have certainly not decreased, and we find it more difficult in that fragmented world that President Yul was referring to find an agreement, to find consensus, to find cooperation. It becomes very, very challenging, very challenging. So on the other hand, we need, there is a lot of global interdependence. We certainly need more solidarity. We need more collective action to tackle the challenges that we have today. And we are in a critical decade for climate change. So whatever happens in COP28, we as European Union, we have to scale up our climate change ambitions to keep that 1.5 degrees Celsius objective. We have our legal framework. Perhaps you're going, Sasha, to speak a bit more of this, but just let me say some key features. The famous European Green Deal is there, but it sets a very, very, I would say, big ambition of 55% of net greenhouse emissions reduction by 2030. 2030 is only 7 years, I will say even 6 years from now, 1 year less. So this is a very, very short time. How are we going to get there? It's going to put a lot of pressure in politicians, in governments, and the pressure is also going to come from the bottom-up approach. We have also the climate neutrality 2050, to which also Korea has adhered to. And we have all this ambitious target legally framed in our European climate law, which is compulsory for EU, not only institutions, but EU 27 countries. They have to take the necessary measures. They have to implement this action in all fairness and solidarity, helping each other, that's for sure. But we are going to keep track of this process very concrete. We review it every 5 years according to Paris agreements as well. That is inside Europe, and there are 55 legislation pieces because this climate transition goes for every sector in society and in economy, and everyone is affected. You will see now in the last months first months of 2024, trying to push all this legislation forward, but now there will come the implementation, and the next European government, there will be also elections like in Korea in May. They will have to then follow up with additional legislation, the climate agenda, which is now settled, the framework settled in the EU. But now we will have to come to how we implement all this legislation, and that will be a key moment. At the same time, we are determined to engage and work with partners worldwide. As I said before, it is a global endeavor. We cannot do it alone. We are going to do that first to implement Paris and continue with the COPs, but also with all the pledges and agreements and commitments that were done in the different COPs. This is not about COP28, it's about COP26 and the others as well, and COP27. What are we going to do? It's also about how we can limit the global temperature increase to 1.5. It's also how we support the most vulnerable, the countries that are less developed, and how we increase collective climate finance. And I'm going just to say a word for each of them. How we are going to keep 1.5 target on track. I think we need the EU at COP28 has aimed to triple global renewable energy capacity and double energy efficiency improvement rates by 2030. And here I think Korea has still a lot of homework to do. You have your 6.7% of renewables, and you have to reach 21%, which is less than what you had foreseen before. But how are you going to do it? And you really need to do it. There is no way any country and the way Korea is configured that you can only going to do it with nuclear. This is not possible. So you need your renewables and you need to develop them. That is certainly important. And, I know that European business is trying to contribute also on the offshore wind and on other areas to help you. The other one is we need to reach an agreement of phasing out of unabated fossil fuels. I know discussions are going on in COP until the very minute. There is a lot of interest. You have the countries which want the oil industry and the coal industry, the gas are very, very pertinent, but this has to stop. And we have to make sure that fossil fuel consumptions peaks ahead of 2030, and then phase out fossil fuel subsidies to address that do not address energy poverty and just transition. So all the others need to go. And our key message in COP28 is clear. We need to set a decisive step forward. It's about ambition, about targets, about finance, and clearly the dependence on fossil fuels has made countries more vulnerable to geopolitical, economic, and societal risk. Look what happened with the war in Ukraine. I mean, it's clearly how much dependence Europe was on Russians. Fossil fuels and how quick we managed to get out of that dependence. But Otherwise, it creates that vulnerability that was so important and so difficult in this case. So we have to do it already in the near term, and we could recognize a measure transitional role for natural gas. That is what we are doing, LNG, and that is also what Korea, but it has to be phased also as quick as possible. Let's see, that is one of the big areas where there is a lot to be done, and we will speak about that a lot in the months to come and years to come. The other one is we have to stand by our partners, especially to protect the most vulnerable worldwide. And I think the EU has led two initiatives, various initiatives at COP, but let me mention two. The Global Pledge on Renewable and Energy Efficiency, very important, to try to triple the renewable energy capacity to 11 terawatts and to double the rate of energy efficient from 2 to 4 worldwide. And I think you have to see that how you do energy efficient there. Also, Korea needs to scale up a lot, even on buildings, on how you build, how consumers have also the role to play in energy efficiency. Also, if we look at the war in Ukraine and what Europe had to do to get out of Russian oil and gas, with all the big crisis that was here last summer, we reduced energy efficiency through the consumers by 15%. So 15%, that allowed what was the effort that the European consumers did on energy efficient, and that had certainly contributed that the needs for oil and gas and were less. So Korea has signed up this pledge, so we hope we can work together. The second one I want to mention is the financial support of 175 million to the methane finance sprint. This is an initiative under the Global Methane Pledge, which was done in a previous COP. And also Korea participates in the Global Methane Pledge, and hope we can work together hand in hand to work with other countries, helping them on this very difficult energy transition. Final word on climate finance. Also, the world has reached an annual average of $803 billion for global climate finance, but I think development countries need more than $6 trillion to get there. So how are we going to work on that gap? We are already the largest contributor of climate finance to our neighbors and global partners. 23 billion euros as Team Europe, as EU and its member states together, and contributed to the Green Climate Fund and to the global pledging to the global energy transition in COP28, also 2.3 billion. I mean, it's a lot of figures, a lot of money that is needed to do all this big transition, but we have to work together. A last word on our cooperation with Korea. I think that the global cooperation needs to be going hand in hand with bilateral cooperation with Korea. Certainly, we are this year celebrating the 60 years of our relations, our One Gap, and there we had three very important agreements: the free trade agreement, the cooperation agreement, which includes a very big area of climate, environment, and energy, and also our security cooperation. We in May, when we were celebrating our One Gap, our 60 years, the leaders came together here to Seoul, and we launched the Green Partnership, also a very good initiative, which I will hope in 2023 we will see it being implemented. And it covers, enables us together to step the climate action, our cooperation on environment protection, on clean and just transition, but also to jointly support developing countries. How can we work together, helping the other countries in this global effort for this climate transition? It also includes issues like carbon pricing, batteries, work together on plastic products, supply chains, resilient, just and clean transition, renewable, green hydrogen. It covers everything. But so my big task now will be how do we start and where do we cooperate? Which actions do we start first? And it goes hand in hand with what Chairman Ha was mentioning about digitalization, artificial intelligence. We have also a digital partnership. We have to put them together. I think it's very difficult to get out climate alone. It's about economic security. It's all these threats that we have mentioned at the beginning have to go together, are interdependent. So our digital partnership, our green partnership, digitalization and green transition goes hand in hand. So a very important year for all, 2024. And just let me leave you one single message. There is no alternative. Global cooperation is the only viable solution. Climate knows no borders. So both Korea will have to scale up its climate ambitions. That is the message I am always pushing to government and institutions. We have to do it as well. How we can do it, and the earliest we get together and do this, the better. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Castillo-Fernandez. Now I ask Professor Young-Gu Kim to moderate session 1. Please welcome Professor Kim.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Young-Gu Kim from Hanyang University. Ambassador Fernandez, touched upon very important issues regarding climate change and the connection of climate change to economic security at the end. The stock taking she did over the recent climate change trends. Let me reiterate some of the points she made. The first point she made, I think, is that the message that climate change, discussion about climate change has been around for a long time, maybe even some fatigue we are feeling about this because, over and over again. But what we have to do today, I think, is to have some understanding where climate change is going. And despite, so many years we are discussing climate change, at the moment, where we are in terms of, reaching the goal, which is, clock is ticking, 2030 will be an important milestone to get to the final destination, 2050. As she mentioned, I think, we need to be doubling down on the deployment of renewable energy, which is way below the destination, the final destination, which is 1.5. She said by 2030, we need to be tripling renewable energy technology and doubling efficiency. In so doing, what are needed, climate change is very difficult and complex, as you mentioned. It's complex, difficult to achieve because climate change has many faces. In the beginning, we all understood climate change is just about, phasing out fossil fuels. Oil and gas, say goodbye to oil and gas, then renewable energy will just, enter the stage. But it's not easy. Renewable energy is not alone. Renewable energy is just part of mitigation of GHG. 45%, less than 50%. Even if we deploy 100% of renewable energy, we cannot get to the destination. Because adaptation and, a process, emissions, and, energy technology will be even more difficult. Like we need to get more difficult renewable energy, like hydrogen. We need to get hydrogen involved. So the message fully taken. First, climate change is very complex and full array of energy technology must be deployed. Thirdly, it must be inclusive as well. So on this note, I'd like to invite three respected scholars. Let me first introduce our speakers. First, we have Senem Atvur from Akdeniz University, Antalya, Turkey. Thank you for coming. Second, we have Eun-Ah Kim, National Assembly Futures Institute. She's going to discuss some critical minerals, supply chain of battery critical minerals today. Thirdly, we have Heejin Han from Bugyong National University. So I'd like you to spend about 15 minutes for presentation, and three presentations will naturally lead to three discussants. I'd like to first introduce Taedong Lee from Yonsei University, and Eunju Lee, Korea University, and Young Song, Yonsei University. So presentation, 15 minutes, and discussion, 7 minutes. So we'd like to start off by inviting Senem Atvur to the podium.
Thank you very much. Yes, here's my presentation. Before I start, I would like to thank the East Asia Institute for inviting me to this conference and give me a chance to speak to this distinguished audience. I am today talking about the climate change and environmental security and the European Union's perspective on environmental security especially. As we know, increasing global temperatures due to anthropogenic activities, especially the use of fossil fuels as a main energy resource since the Industrial Revolution, has degraded natural balance and broken the ecological cycles. As a result, the phenomenon of climate change has accelerated with its devastating impacts on natural, social, economic, and political systems. Climate change has become a global crisis, producing several interconnected security problems. Closed it. The physical impacts of climate change have created new security challenges for states, humans, ecosystems, and international peace and stability. In this regard, in this presentation, I aim to reveal the security impacts of climate change through the environmental security approach, a little introduction to environmental security with its several perspectives, and also to try to respond how European Union positions to the nexus of climate change and security will be the focus of the presentation. Environmental security actually is not a monolithic approach. There are different perspectives inside the environmental security. Since the mid-1980s, when the devastating impacts of ecological degradation have been considered among security issues. Along with the discussion on redefining security, national security in particular, ecological problems began to be examined with the potential of conflict and migration. After the 1990s, as the human security concept was developed, ecological problems began to be assessed through humanitarian crisis and socioeconomic injustices and inequalities. Academic studies on environmental problems, either in the national security or human security context, have shaped the environmental security literature. As long as this literature extends, an ecological security perspective is also included in environmental security. Ecological security is a much more normative perspective, and it's based on a holistic view, seeing humans as a part of nature and focusing on the ecological balance maintained through international regulations, sanctions, collaboration, and justice. There is also another approach, different than the ecological security, one of the new security perspective. It's sustainable security. It also puts a lens on environmental issues. Sustainable security focuses on the intersection of environmental, economic, and security policies and aims to reconcile the collective security needs of states, humans, and nature within a sustainability framework. In recent years, of course, the focus of environmental security perspective has been on the climate crisis. Here, while climate change has accelerated, its physical impacts also exacerbates. Droughts, heat waves, flash or torrential rains, floods, wildfires, hurricanes and tornadoes, and sea level rise have intensified all around the world. And these devastating impacts of climate change have created a global crisis intertwined with other socio-economic and political problems. Now we are talking about climate crisis that poses intersecting risks for different actors and sectors, security objects of the global system. Here, you can see the different actors, and they are also the security referent objects of security. And they are differently threatened by the risks posed by climate change for states, individuals, ecosystems, and global system as well. There are different and interdependent, interconnected security risks. And we can say that different actors of the global system have become more vulnerable because of the impacts especially because of the impacts of climate change. Undoubtedly, as the devastating impacts of climate change have intensified, the efforts of states and other international actors have become more crucial. Among these actors, the European Union is the most ambitious one that has implemented more effective policies. In this regard, we can talk about the Kyoto procedures and Paris procedures that have been implemented by the European Union. After the ratification of the Kyoto Protocol in 1998, with a target to reduce emissions by 20% by 2022, European Union started to redesign its emission reduction procedures by implementing market mechanisms, including carbon trade regulated by the protocol. And between 1990 and 2014, the European Union reduced its greenhouse gas emissions in Europe by 23%. And after the ratification of ratification of the Paris Agreement, the European Union published its nationally determined contribution, and accordingly, it pledged to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030 compared to 1990. And after this nationally determined contribution, publication of this document, in 2019, the European Union Commission President Ursula von der Leyen presented the European Green Deal program integrated with European Climate Law and European Climate Pact. European Green Deal is the most comprehensive and ambitious response of the European Union to the climate crisis. It is a comprehensive transformation process that aims to create a carbon neutral continent by 2015 by considering the well-being of citizens and the needs of industry with a balanced perspective. The main pledge of the European Union is to reduce emissions by 55% by 2030. So it's very ambitious plan. Along with this far-reaching plan to combat climate change, the European Union also considers the security aspects of climate change. In 2008, the Secretary General of the Council of the European Union and European Union High Representative for Common and Foreign and Security Policy as well, Javier Solana, published a paper entitled Climate Change and International Security. In this document, climate change was defined as a threat multiplier, and the risks posed by climate change to states, human security, and international security were underlined. In this regard, the threats related to climate change are evaluated as resource conflict, economic damage, risks for critical infrastructure, loss of territory, border disputes, environmentally induced migration, instability, fragility, radicalization, tension over energy supplies, and pressure on international governments. And after this document, several European Union documents focusing on security, defense, or diplomacy addressed the threat multiplier role of the climate change. To sum up, I can show this figure. It reflects the European Union's position regarding the climate change and security nexus. The European Union considers climate security in not only the military context, but also together with economic, social, and humanitarian aspects. Cooperation on sustainable development, operational effectiveness of conflict prevention and crisis management, reducing environmental and carbon footprint of civilian and military capabilities through innovation, strengthening resilience by disaster response, energy transition to prevent and manage peace and security risks are seen as inseparable parts of climate security. And there is also some climate priorities that we can find in these documents. And these are emission cuts, industrial transformation, innovation, energy security, sustainable development, and environmental protection, adaptation strategies, well-being and prosperity of European citizens, resilience, with strengthening vulnerable communities in the are included to the climate policies. There is also another question, whose security are prioritized by European Union in terms of environmental security? The emphasis on human well-being, vulnerabilities, equity, and equality shows that the nexus of human and environmental security is integrated into climate policies. Further, as the European Union is structured through an I forgot the slides. I'm sorry. Yes, European Union is structured through an economic integration process, safeguarding economic sectors, industry, and competitiveness, maintaining energy security, and improving renewable energy become a priority. Therefore, economic security mostly prevails over environmental security concerns. In this context, the European Union's climate security perspective seems to be compatible with the sustainable security approach. As I mentioned at the beginning, sustainable security provides a balanced framework to assess the risks of climate change and implement more effective and sustainable policies. European Union considers protecting economic interest and social welfare, but at the same time, it has adopted detailed environmental procedures and protective regulations. The nexus of climate change and conflict and its relationship with migration flows are another priority of the European Union's security concerns. Conflict prevention and management, military operations and capabilities, the defense industry and policies are also at focus, and a green transformation for the military sector is also included in the European climate policies. These targets in terms of the green transition and the transition of military and defense have also been compatible with other geopolitical and geostrategic expectations of the European Union. On the other hand, an ecological security perspective is lacking in the European Union climate initiatives. Despite its emphasis on collective action, binding regulations, multilateral cooperation, and the planetary risks of the climate crisis, nature and the functioning of ecosystems remain secondary compared to humanitarian and economic risks. And there is some challenge we have to mention about the implementation of environmental security perspectives in the European Union climate policies. There are some missing points regarding these, the implementation of these perspectives to the climate policies. It's still controversial and vague whether the European Union can deepen the framework of the common security and defense policy and common foreign policy to place them to the supranational level. Even though the European Union emphasizes collective security and action to fight the impacts of climate change, national governments have still their own agendas in terms of security and foreign policy. It's also ambiguous whether national governments easily adopt and apply the requirements of the Green Deal despite its binding mechanisms. There is also another challenge. The priority of economic sectors is one of them. The impact of new economic sectors on the environment of third countries is another challenge. It's related to using critical minerals, especially because the critical minerals are indispensable for green technologies. However, the mining activities have important environmental impact on especially the countries where the mining areas. And there is also challenge posed by migration, which will be exacerbated by the risks posed by climate change. And there is another challenge posed by far-right governments. They are strengthening their political positions in a lot of European countries, and they have a strong anti-climate and anti-European Union narratives, and they can influence the public opinions in that way. So it's challenging for implementation of climate policies. And there is also the unwillingness to contribute to climate fund and international aid mechanisms. Thanks to its economic and technological capacity and high awareness, the climate resilience of European continent is relatively stronger than other regions. However, the instability and risk of conflict in other regions due to the intervened crisis threaten the stability and security of the European Union as well. In this line, European Union's ambitious climate policies might be a key to broadening international cooperation for mitigation and adaptation efforts and accelerating decarbonization. But the planet needs more courageous and significant transformation to cope with these interconnected problems in the age of climate change. Thank you for your attention, and I am sorry to excess my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So building on Maria Castillo-Fernandez speech, she kind of provided us with what's going on inside the European Union on, climate change, the mitigation efforts and others. At the end, she mentioned this naturally leads us to our second presentation. In my previous remarks, general remarks that, if nothing done, the temperature will be reaching 3.2 degrees Celsius by 2050. So a lot of efforts must be done to bring the temperature down to 1.5. lots of things must be done, but most important thing is to expand renewable energy. That's the message. The most important thing, expand renewable energy technology. But the current changes tell us that a lot of limitations to the expansion of renewable energy. Most of all, renewable energy requires all sorts of metals, critical minerals. But critical minerals, supply of it is not free. It's dominated by a particular country. And supply chain of critical minerals is concentrated, geographically concentrated. So 2 points. Geographically concentrated, which is not strange. We had same problem with oil and gas. So geographically concentrated. But making this problem even more difficult is the domination by a particular country. So to deploy more renewable energy, which are required to be reaching 1.5 goal, we need free-flowing supply of critical minerals, which is not available. So how do we make that happen? Probably our second presentation will teach us some ways in which we can kind of resolve this problem. Please.
Hello, I'm Eun-Ah Kim from National Assembly Futures Institute. I'm really pleased to be here, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to present our recent research result. And as Professor Kim already briefly summarized my presentation, thank you, by the way. Maybe I can shorten my presentation. And my presentation covers that reside within the intersection of environmental security and economic security within the framework of global reordering. So I picked up this issue when I was doing research on the circular economy, and later I realized this has more broader context, and this has to be discussed within with others. Researchers. So I initiated research with Sung-Jun Park, who is the economist and doing research on supply chain, and Jung Mi-cha, who's doing research on international politics, especially focusing on Chinese issues. So I like to acknowledge those co-authors. So moving on. I have 2 questions to answer. One is, what are the risks? What constitutes risk? And the second one is, what could be the response strategy? The first one, before we move on to the answer directly, what are the situations? Why now? So we are now moving toward green transition and digital transition, and obviously, we will have more demand in manufacturing, renewables, e-mobility, and ICT, etc. So, those devices are heavily dependent on the strategic materials and critical materials. So, when you have this rising demand, if you have the supplies proportionally, that's not going to be a problem. But later you will see that there are supply issues. So that describes our situation and the risk later on. And this is the research result conducted by EU. And this, you can see, we have this rising demand, especially lithium and graphite and cobalt, which are the major component of battery. So if you are going to produce this battery and the e-mobility and have more competency in this industry, you will have to have a stable supply. And unfortunately, we do not. and a lot of countries as well, except for one country. And the answer for the first question by now, it was the rising demand. And the second answer is US-China competition. So the bottom line of this US-China competition is awareness of China as a major threat to the domestic economics. Here I show some results which are not published yet, and we've conducted some study about the green transition and the competition of US-China in green transition technology. And after I see this graph, I recognize CRM, critical raw material, is a new battlefield in this transition era. So you see that China is dominating most part of the technological patent applications, but still their high impact patent is still following the leading countries. But when you see the market share and influence, the potential influence to the foreign countries, it's really it's rising and it is becoming more important. So this describes the backdrop of the CRM issue. So the China as a major threat, and the rising demand is another source of this risk. And against this backdrop, what are the real risks? What constitute this risk? This is Korea's situation. These are a few examples of future technology in Korea, and unfortunately, we have this absolute dependence on overseas products, and 3 of them are heavily dependent on Chinese products. More or less, 50% are coming from China. So in this case, we can solve this problem by either expanding the domestic smelting and refining industries, or expanding the overseas mining and local smelting refining industry. Really simple answer, but neither of them are feasible. And Korea and other developed countries have like this limitation of increasing these facilities in a short time. We have really strict environmental regulations, so it's really it becomes expensive to produce those materials in Korea and in other developed countries. So it's not economically feasible. And so if we look at the other countries, which is relatively more economically feasible, we'll see another challenges later when we see some maps. This table summarized the production share of those critical raw materials. And when you subtract China here, you do not have any metal, except for 2 or 3 metals. You do not have any critical raw materials without Chinese being involved in the whole process. Especially, China has dominated the processing of these critical raw materials. So what that means is, even though you found alternative sources, mining, for example, you will have to see the processing company owned by China. So the critical raw material is coming from China or through China. So this describes the first risk. And the second risk, now you found alternative sources like Congo or South Africa or even Russia, if possible. And that country is not reliable. If you see the world governance indicators, a lot of alternative countries have a low level of world governance indicator score. So the removing all those risky countries, you will only have Indonesia or Australia, and those countries can only provide nickel, lithium, zirconium, and several others. So what can we do with other critical raw materials that are going to be still in need? So are we doomed? But I think it's not a really good situation, but we are doing our best. So the response strategies can be only it cannot remove all the risk. It's our best response strategies to reduce the risk. The EU has recognized this risk early ages. In 2008, EU launched Critical Raw Material Initiative, and every 3 or 5 years they renewed the list of critical raw materials. And recently, early this year, they announced the draft of Critical Raw Material Act. And U.S. does not have long history of response strategy, but recent couple of years they announced several strategies and quite important movement. They identified 13 critical minerals related to clean energy technology, and even in IRA, it has some component related to the supply of critical mineral. And even Defense Production Act has been modified to include those important items that also includes minerals for batteries. So U.S. is responding this risk in this way, and China also. They are doing their best to reduce the risk of a supply, CRM supply. And they not only at risk, but also they see this as an opportunity in earlier age. In 2011, they have announced breakthrough action plan for mineral acquisition. And in 2015, they have announced Made in China 2025. And in 2016, they have announced National Mineral Resource Plan. So they have prepared this really thoroughly. And now early this year, they recognized this as a lifeline of strategic industries. So the reality is not really simple and really difficult. So what can we do? Korea, what can we do? Well, fortunately, maybe, Ministry of Trade and Industry and Energy announced the strategies, and that's quite similar to what EU has announced previously. And that includes diversification of the supply chain and expanding more facilities and developing more advanced technologies to have alternative sources of CRM. And we have these 3 bills pending regarding national resource security. And those bills cover not only critical raw materials, but also other resources in general. And here I add a few words regarding the long-term strategy. First, diversification. That's a must. There's no other way around. But at the same time, we need to consider the compliance of ESG standard application applicable to the mining and processing CRM, because ESG standard is going to be a new norm, even in this mining and smelting industry. That's as of now that those industries are regarded as dirty industry, but if it's going to contribute to green transition, it will need to follow the new norm, so-called ESG standard. And the second one is we will, as I've already explained, the transition phase, we will have to either expand the facility, smelting and refining facility within the nation or outside the nation, but those are not feasible. So in the long term, we will have to go to the green growth scenario. That's gonna be by circular economy. That means if we do not have resources on site, we will have to put those instruments having this CRM back to the production line at the beginning. So that's going to be only a solution, sustainable solution. And that way we will not be here. Maybe it's better to look at this. So by only going to green growth scenario, we can decouple from the state of overseas resource supply. So that's why I suggest we need to shorten the transition phase by technological advancement in recycling and remanufacturing. And lastly, when you do the technological advancement, it's not enough. We need to scale up and do the commercialization. For that, we need a standardization process, and we need to actively engage in those international processes. Thank you.
Thank you again. Some of the lessons I think on this issue is that renewable energy expansion is never peaceful. Maybe even dirtier than oil and gas. This is a case where, energy transition kind of transforms into geopolitical conflict. To help you understand this a little bit, carbon emission cuts come in several stages. Maybe kind of a hierarchy. There is a hierarchy of cutting emissions, all related to energy technology. Maybe the easiest one at the bottom, stage one will be power sector transition, like replacing oil and gas and coal with renewable energy, which has been done, more or less done in many countries, especially in the European countries. Replacement of coal and gas with renewable energy. But this power sector change, relatively cheaper, easier, especially in the European Union, much has been done. But the second stage is transportation. Cutting emissions in the transportation, much more difficult, which is happening right now. So in terms of cutting emissions, we are now at the stage of transportation emission cuts. It's about rolling out EVs, producing batteries, therefore demand for critical minerals rising. But as you could see, transportation emission cuts, which is energy transition, and power sector emission cuts, a little different. Power sector emission cuts, much more peacefully done. No geopolitics involved. But transportation, EV and battery, a lot of geopolitics going on. Because the stakes are much higher. The industry of EV making, battery making, money involved in this, much bigger than power sector. That's why, tackling climate change, temperature issue, tackling this becomes, US-China competition. So maybe what's the next step? Beyond transportation emission cuts, maybe we will see much higher level of emission cuts, maybe buildings. I don't know whether that's going to be a geopolitical, but buildings or production process cuts, which is more difficult, higher technology involved. So we are only at the maybe stage 2. So energy transition, despite many years that have passed, just at the beginning. So power sector first, second transportation. Many more sectors and industries, new high-tech industries will be coming in the future. So maybe this list, third presenter, Heejin, please invite you to the podium, please.
So good afternoon. I am Heejin from Bugyeong National University, located in Busan. So I might be the only person from Busan. Thank the EAI for hosting me to speak at this interesting and important event. I'll be talking about how climate change and energy security can be a reconcilable goal. So as we might agree, climate change poses one of the most intricate challenges that the international community is facing today. And since the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change was signed in 1992 at Rio, governments around the world have been making efforts to address the issue. However, the global governance of climate change has not been so effective, as Professor Ha mentioned during his keynote speech. Global governance hasn't been effective, actually, in many areas, but climate change might be the areas. So even though the Paris Agreement signed in 2015 aims to hold the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius and ideally 1.5 degrees Celsius, we are not getting there, right? The UNFCCC estimated that greenhouse gas emission must peak before 2025 at the latest and decline by 43% by 2030 to achieve 1.5 degrees Celsius goal. However, limiting warming to 1.5 degrees by the end of this century has become a daunting task as the evidence of negative climate impact has accumulated at an accelerating scale and speed. A recent study published in Nature Climate Change argues that carbon neutrality should be achieved by 2034, not 2050, to achieve 1.5 degrees Celsius goal. The energy sector is one of the most important sectors to address climate change, as many of the speakers have mentioned. And it is really important especially to phase out unabated coal and make a genuine energy transition to address global climate change issue. This means breaking with the carbon-intensive socio-economic paths and making political commitments for systemic changes. However, the COVID-19 and the Ukraine war erupted in late 2019 and early 2022 each have unleashed multiple energy-related challenges. While the net effects of COVID-19 on the global energy system are still being examined, there have been some immediate challenges. The energy system experienced a rapid and steady drop in electricity demand as a result of the COVID-19 and the lockdown measures. At the same time, the pandemic delayed the deployment of renewable energy-related technology and infrastructure as the world went through an unprecedented disruption in the supply chains of parts such as batteries and raw materials, including minerals. On the other hand, the pandemic has served as a reminder that the world needs a green transition and responses to global environmental challenges to avert another large-scale virus contagion in the future. Thus, some have pointed out the necessity to accelerate the energy transition even faster. In fact, the renewable energy sector recorded a steady growth despite disruptions like the pandemic, and the year 2022 was named a record year for renewable capacity as renewable energy was added at an unprecedented scale. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has deepened the energy-related challenges as Russia, one of the biggest players in the global energy sector, announced its cutoff of energy provision to Europe and to other parts of the world under international sanctions. The gas price in particular skyrocketed in Europe as Russia stopped supplying gas through pipelines. Prices of other energy sources have also spiked to historical highs, threatening businesses and households. The post-COVID-19 supply chain disruption grew even larger in the context of the war. Thus, the COVID-19 and Ukraine war served as an external shocks to the global energy system. Energy security, a concept that had long been subsided since the 1970s, the oil crisis, has once again made its way to the top of the agenda around the world, especially among the countries with high energy dependence rates. Governments and media started to emphasize the necessity for drastic recovery for energy security through rapidly securing energy supply to deal with the blackouts and fuel shortages. Faced with the energy insecurity situation, countries, including those in Europe, have begun to resume the operation of old coal-fired and nuclear power plants as quick remedies. Such actions and measures for recovering energy security, however, raise the question of whether they would delay the energy transition governments around the world had been pursuing in order to tackle the climate crisis. While understandable given the energy crisis and the far-reaching negative impact, such a question reflects the doubt that the energy security and climate change are not compatible goals. Such a question or a doubt suggests that renewable energy is not desirable if energy security is the utmost priority of a government. However, I would like to argue that energy security and energy transition can be reconciled in light of the deepening climate crisis. The World Economic Forum already highlighted the importance of reconciling such goals, arguing that successful energy transition needs to have three elements in what it calls the energy triangle: security and access, environmental sustainability, and economic development and growth. The European Union is a case in point illustrating how climate change goals and energy security goals can be pursued together. EU has marked itself as a leader in the global climate change and sustainable development realm. The region has been implementing various programs to achieve carbon neutrality 2050 to meet climate change challenges. For instance, EU adopted Green Deal in late 2019 for green transformation of the region, and Fit for 55 containing the goal of 55% emission reduction from 1990 level by 2030. It also enacted the European climate law, enshrining the goal of achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. All of these policies contain renewable energy as a core element. EU, however, met obstacles in its energy security situation in the wake of the pandemic and the Ukraine war. As the fuel prices went up after the outbreak of the war, European countries went back to the coal and nuclear as stopgap measures. This move raised the question whether EU's climate change and energy transition goals would be undermined due to the energy security concerns. However, instead of overturning its existing energy transition and climate goals, EU has responded by reinforcing its climate change and energy security goals, energy transition goals. This move demonstrated that climate change and energy security goals can be pursued together if policymakers have a strong will to do. EU adopted Repower EU plan in March 2020 with the goal of reducing the dependence on Russian gas by 1/3 of the pre-war level by the end of 2020 and to eliminate the dependence once and for all by 2030. This is EU's declaration to wean itself off of the Russian energy supply as the fundamental solution to maximizing its energy security. So launched officially in May 2022, REPowerEU aimed to help EU save energy, produce clean energy, and diversify energy supplies. REPowerEU envisions the deployment of renewables to reduce the demand for natural gas in the power sector in the short to medium term, the electrification of its support fleet to phase out fossil fuels, and the rollout of heat pumps to reduce its residential and commercial sectors' consumption of natural gas for heating in the medium to long term. The EU Commission states that the program has already saved almost 20% of EU's energy consumption and doubled the new deployment of renewables. 39% of the electricity consumed in 2022 came from renewables in EU. Moreover, 80% of the Russian pipeline gas was replaced in less than 8 months. These measures intended to reinforce EU's energy security in the face of external threats. REPowerEU plans thus aims to speed up the green transition while strengthening energy security. Within a year or so, the program managed to generate more electricity from wind and solar sources than from gas, reached a record of 41 gigawatt of new solar energy capacity installed, and increased wind capacity by 16 gigawatt. In March 2023, the EU agreed on even stronger legislation to increase its renewable capacity, raising EU's binding target for 2030 to 42.5%, with the ambition to reach 45%. This would double the existing share of renewable energy in the EU region. One might argue that these things have been possible because the EU have many advanced economies as member states. However, even in other parts of the world, things have been possible. Countries have been trying to reconcile climate goals with energy security concerns. Although there have been some setbacks in the wake of the COVID-19 and Ukraine war, countries in Asia look like they also would not give up on their energy transition policy either. Japan, for instance, has been trying to recover its industrial competitiveness through the 2022 Green Transformation GX Plan, which is also an approach to reduce its energy dependence. The long-term goal of the GX Plan is to decarbonize while strengthening energy security and resilience. China and India have also raised their renewable energy targets and continue to promote green mobilities and clean energy technologies. Indonesia and Malaysia are also closing many of their existing coal-fired power plants to obtain international financial assistance, such as the Just Energy Transition Partnership. I'm not saying it's easy to achieve both green energy transition for climate change and energy security. Renewable energy has to obtain scale economy through improved cost competitiveness. Renewable energies such as wind and solar have also dealt with intermittency and variability challenges through energy storage system, technology, and more efficient grid system management. These kinds of technology require large-scale deployment of financial resources and infrastructure. In addition, clean energy technology such as solar cells and batteries require sustained supply of raw materials, including critical minerals. The supply chains of such ingredients and parts are at risk of disruption due to reasons such as geopolitics and resource nationalism and so on. However, traditional fossil fuels are not even any better in terms of these risks and potential threats. As responses to climate change become much more urgent, fossil fuel power plants carry the risk of becoming stranded assets. Compared to the renewable energy sources, oil, coal, and gas require movement from the originally extracted countries to consuming countries through shipping, which entails risks and costs. Renewable energies, in comparison, can be deployed in a small scale for energy sufficiency of households and villages, as can be seen in Europe. Various studies suggest that renewables will continue to grow. McKinsey's Global Energy Perspective 2023 states that renewable energy sources are expected to provide between 45 and 50% of global energy generation by 2040 and between 65 and 85% by 2050. While accounting for only 20% of total investment in 2012, renewables and decarbonization technologies are projected to make up between 40 and 50% of total investment by 2040. Governments participating in COP28 have pledged to work together to triple the world's installed renewable energy generation capacity to at least 11,000 gigawatts by 2030. So to sum up, energy security, particularly since the end of the pandemic and Ukraine war, has been used as a justification for delaying the clean energy transition, but energy security does not need to be undermined by renewable energy sources. When they reach scale and are pursued as local projects meeting the local energy needs, they serve as steady and accessible energy sources, ramping up energy security while helping mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. Energy shocks such as the ones triggered by the COVID-19 and Ukraine war can take place again in the post-COVID-19 world. The international community should build a more resilient energy system while pursuing low carbon and carbon-free energy transition in the age of deepening climate crisis. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. I've been just told by the organizer that second session must begin at 4:30. Therefore, we have 15 minutes, maybe less than 15 minutes. So our three discussants, can I kindly ask you to limit your time to 3 minutes? Yeah, so that we can maybe receive at least one question from the floor. Sorry.
I will budget my discussion for 5 minutes. Okay, a quick question for the climate change and security. What are the quick questions? So, does and will climate change beget internal or interstate or intrastate conflict? Or the climate change kill people or damage the economic properties and infrastructures? The simple question is yes, and more likely. So do you know how much area was burned in 2023 Canada wildfire? It's about 130,000 square kilometer. In Australia, it's about 120,000 square kilometer. Do you know the area of South Korea? It's about 100,000 square kilometer. That means the burned area, impacted area from wildfire in Canada and Australia is much bigger than the area of South Korea. So if you imagine that if you have, fire in this room, it'll be disaster. It'll be, if you have a fire in this building, that'll be disaster. But if you have fire all around the Seoul, which has 600 square kilometer, much bigger disaster. But we are experiencing this property damages and burning places everywhere around the world. So that means climate change is the security issue because it kills people and also damage properties and infrastructures. And it's not just about Canada or Australia. We had Typhoon Hinnamno in 2022, and we had about 2 billion losses in Pohang area, POSCO. 2조 won loss. It's huge. And also there are many casualties in Pohang area as well. So it is not just the issue of Canada or Australia, it happens in South Korea as well. And also we see that the second things we can consider is how the climate change impact on human migrations. As you probably all know, this year 2023 in Syria there was flood, and also about more than 7,000 people die of flood and demolished dam, and that has a serious impact on the human migrations. How can we deal with these refugees? That is another issue. So we should deal with the internal and intra and also inter conflict of a state. And also we can see that there's a lot of effort to raise a bar, in particular from EU and US. Maybe it's a good signal and positive impact to change the behavior of companies and countries around the world. That's a positive sign. However, that can be seen as also the trade barrier as well. So how can we deal with and reconcile this, the EU's CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, and US IRA, Inflation Reduction Act? So it's a pretty good signal for the climate change. However, that can be play a role as a trade barrier for country like South Korea. So how can we deal with this issue? Is that the thing that we need to cover as well?
Good afternoon. My name is Eun-Ah Lee. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Graduate School of Energy and Environment, Korean University. I sincerely appreciate this opportunity to enhance my perspective regarding the intertwined challenges posed by climate change. Dr. Eun-Ah Kim proposed a three-pronged approach to address supply chain risks of critical raw materials, including diversifying the supply chain, encouraging domestic recycling and efficiency gains, and implementing technology standardization efforts. South Korea is also enhancing its crisis response capabilities and diversifying critical raw materials through bilateral and multilateral cooperation. As part of this strategy, the country intends to revitalize its overseas and domestic mineral resources. The government is adopting a different approach by encouraging the private sector to lead the development of these resources instead of making direct state investment as they have done in the past. The state will conduct comprehensive assessment to explore the feasibility of development, including economic viability and financial support. Korea implements diverse strategies to secure critical raw materials for technological advancement. Collaborative partnership between Korean and Chinese companies such as SK On, EcoPro, LG Chem, and Post Future M fortify the supply chain, particularly in battery production. These alliances ensure a stable supply of essential minerals for battery manufacturing, aiming to reduce reliance on limited suppliers and bolster Korea's position in green technology. An exemplary partnership like POSCO Future M's alliance with Huawei Cobalt localizes secondary battery precursor production in Korea, reinforcing technological self-reliance in critical raw material supply chains. These strategic partnership transcends borders, underscoring Korea's commitment to a sustainable and consistent supply of critical raw materials for advancing technological industries. However, recent adjustment mandated by the U.S. that limit joint ventures with Chinese firms will likely impose financial burdens on Korean firms as they need to renegotiate contracts to comply. Also, expanding recycling initiative is also a pivotal avenue to alleviate primary supply chain pressures and reduce import dependency on raw materials, significantly curbing carbon footprints. Despite rapid global battery recycling capacity expansion, securing stable feedstock access remains imperative for competitiveness. The dominance of battery recycling capacity in China, Europe, and the US, especially China with about 73% capacity by 2023, underscores the importance of securing feedstock. Recent disruptions like China's halting of essential materials exporting of graphite, urea solution or urea water, and ammonium phosphates starting this month highlight the challenges in achieving resilient supply chains, testing Korea's resilience building measures against the appeal of lower-priced Chinese resources. So Korea's multifaceted approach to securing critical raw materials portrays proactive engagement. However, ongoing challenges necessitate continuous adaptation and refinement of strategies to ensure a robust and resilient supply chain for the future. Thank you.
Excellent. Last but not least, third.
Hi, I will make it 3 minutes, so I have a time set right now. So, okay. Thank you for the great presentation, and then thank you for the great comments from the panel. It has been very, very inspiring. And I guess I just have two broad points to make about the environmental security, energy security and the mitigating climate issue. So when I was reading the paper and listening to the presentation, I thought about how this topic could be relevant to the broader policy and academic debate on North and South debate, or developing and developed countries debate. And we traditionally, the Southern countries often discuss the ways in which some of the climate change measures can hinder their opportunity for the economic development. Whereas the northern countries urges that we all need to contribute to addressing climate change issues. And this binary view, I guess it has evolved into a more multifaceted view, saying that even the southern countries do really care and place their efforts into tackling climate change, like Professor Han mentioned India and China as well. However, some of the Central Asian countries, including Uzbekistan, has been suffering from the energy crisis for a long time. So I guess it's not an easy question, but I guess the remaining and the critical question here is that how would we be able to get these countries to recognize these two goals, energy transition / mitigating climate change efforts and energy security, are not two opposing goals at on the other end. So I guess that's something that we could talk about or think about as we move forward. And the second point is relevant to the energy sovereignty. We talk about energy security, but there's another added concept called energy sovereignty. Energy sovereignty is a right of the conscious individuals and communities and people to make their own decisions on their energy generation and distribution and consumption in a way that is appropriate within their ecological, social, economic, and cultural circumstances, provided that these measures do not affect others negatively. So I guess this concept is very important when we talk about Professor Kim talked about the inclusiveness of energy security as well. So as a country with a high energy dependence, how do we move forward towards energy sovereignty, moving beyond energy security itself? So that's the question I guess I had.
Thank you. Those are excellent points. We have 2 minutes before we close this session. Let me invite 1 or 2 questions from the floor. When you ask questions, please identify yourself, and you can address your question to specific speaker. No question. Oh, yes, please. If you have mic.
예, 잘 들었습니다. 정중이라는데요. 우리 마지막에 송영, 예, 기후금융 지원만으로 사실은 개도국들이 지금 기후위기 때문에 경제개발이 힘들게 생각하는데 과연 그걸 해결할 수 있는지, 어떤 선진국과 개도국 사이의 경제개발 격차 문제, 과연 그게 가능할지 지금 생각합니다.
아까 그 EU 대사님이 전 세계적으로 이거를 개도국, 선진국 다 트랜지션을 달성하려면 6 트릴리언 달러가 필요하다고 그랬거든요. 근데 얼마 전에 약속된 개도국 지원 금액은 얼마였죠? 800 빌리언 달러. 턱없이 부족한데 어떠신가요? 우리 질문.
저도 궁금해서 한번 던져본 질문이라 언젠가는 해결될 수 있다는 희망을 가지고 다 나라들이 모여서 COP28도 일어나고 있는 게 아닌가 싶고, 지금 피해기금, 발전기금을 모아서 기후변화를 선진국 또 오펙 국가들이 또 나서서 돈을 지원을 하고 있는 상황이기 때문에 언젠가는 모든 국가들이 이런 기후변화와 뭐 에너지 세큐리티 이런 골에 대해서도 레코나이를 할 수 있는 날이 오지 않을까 파지리하게 생각해 보지만 아무래도 단기간에는 힘든 일이 아닐까 저는 개인적으로 그렇게 생각합니다. 네.
네, 고맙습니다. 세션 오늘 이제 닫아야 되는데 저도 이쪽 뭐 리딩 보고서 좀 보고 있는데요. 지금 말씀하신 그게 큰 주제인 게 월드 에코노믹 포럼 이런 데서도 보고서를 많이 내는데 핵심 메시지가 뭐냐면 실제 이 기술 개발을 위한 자금이나 이런 게 미국 IRA처럼 다 선진국으로 간다는 거예요, 대부분이. 그래서 실제 변화가 일어나는 거는 개도국이 돼야 되는데 뭐 턱없이 부족하다 이런 보고서들이 많이 나오더라고요. 그래서 오늘 질문해 주신 거 감사하게 생각하고 저희가 또 다음번 모임을 위해서 또 열심히 스터디해서 다음번 모임에 뵙도록 하겠습니다. 세션 1 이것으로 마치겠습니다. 고맙습니다. 네.